Hi, you're muted.
Hello.
Hi.
I typically will start a meeting super early because I am so bad at I'm so bad at, you know. Should I use this virtual background, Nicole, or this one?
Oh yeah, I need to use mine too. I should. For these types of meetings, I like to use it. It's kind of weird, but yeah. Okay, there we go.
Your hair is so adorable.
I'm still figuring it out and working with it and styling it in different ways and figuring out what it does.
Yeah,
But,
it must feel neat.
yeah, it's nice to have it short. I haven't had it short in like, I'm gonna see, about what, 17 years, something like that. So it's been a long time. And this is different than how I had it before. When I was younger, I had it really short, like, and
Really?
yeah, super short. I should send you some pictures.
Yeah, I would
But
love to see that.
my brother found some old pictures of me not long ago and sent them to me. So I have them in my camera here somewhere. Make sure no one's, I don't, oh, we are recording.
Okay.
Okay.
Good luck, Nicole.
Thanks.
How come is mine backwards?
That's okay. That's just how it shows because it mirrors your own image, but yours looks normal from our end.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to stop. So welcome everyone. Let's give it a few more minutes for some additional people to sign in.
I'm not sure who's working on it for you to get us into interpreter mode.
Yeah, I think I have to stop my screen share to do that. I'm waiting for the other interpreter to show up, and then I think, well, I'll get you in.
Whichever.
Oh, wait a minute. There we go. I think I have it. Okay, there we go. Yep, I had to stop screen share. Okay, this is oh, great. Okay. So welcome, maybe 2 more minutes, and then we'll dive in. Still have some people coming in, so give everyone a chance to get here. All right, so good evening. We'll get started here. So thank you for joining us tonight for the Tree Forum. Tonight we have several planning staff from the Community Development Department joining us. We have Brandy Irely, planner, Alex Hunt, planner, Susan McLean, the Community Development Director, and myself, I am Nicole Gaudette. I'm also a planner here with the City of Burien. So we will start with, so just some introductions. Actually, we have a brief survey we'll take next. Then we'll talk about tree regulations, current regulations, and some possible proposed regulations. We'll have some time for questions. Then we'll do a breakout room discussion and then report back from that. So interpretation services are available. So if you need Spanish interpretation, choose the Spanish option at the bottom of your screen. There's a toolbar, so choose Spanish. Unfortunately, we don't have a label for Vietnamese. So if you need Vietnamese interpretation, choose Portuguese at the bottom of your screen.
Okay.
So we're going to start off with the survey. We have 3 survey questions for you. And to get there, you can either scan the QR code on your screen with your mobile device, or the other way, you can log on through your browser. To do that, you go to slido.com, slido.com. At the top of the screen, you locate, well, it'll look like this. You'll see this screen will look like this when you log in. And where it says joining as a participant, right there after that, there's a block that says enter code here, enter 26878. So either scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter the code 26878. I'll give everyone a minute to do that. There's someone else joining us. Okay, so for the people who just signed on, we're going to start with a survey. To get there, you either scan the QR code on your screen, or go to slido.com, and in the screen where it says joining as a participant, where it says enter code here, enter the code 26878. Okay. we go. Just a second here. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Okay, I guess first we had a tree regulations update timeline. So before we get to our survey, so this is what we're going for. We're starting with outreach. So that's January and February. That's the timeline we're in right now. We've done some focus groups. Now we're having the community forum, and this is where we're going to collect feedback to inform the code. Next is, and that will inform the draft that we will develop for these tree regulations. Drafting of the code will occur in March and April. We'll take that to Planning Commission for a meeting and City Council. There will be opportunities for public comment at both those meetings. The next step is the legal side, I guess, where there's review by state agencies and also environmental review. And then after that, the final draft of the code will go to the Planning Commission for a public meeting and public hearing, and then City Council for a workshop and meeting and likely final adoption. So we hope to have this code updated by June. All right, now to the survey. So more people coming in to our meeting. Okay, so if you don't mind, there's a few new people who just joined the meeting. So I'm going to go back a couple slides. People are starting to respond. So for those who just joined, we're going to do a survey. There's two ways to join it. You can either scan the QR code right here with your mobile device. That'll take you right to the survey, or go to slido.com, slido.com, the top of the screen, enter the code here. It's 26878. Okay. So first question is, do you value the presence of trees in your neighborhood? And it looks like everyone's saying yes, they do value those. Second question, are there enough trees in Burien? Looks like it's, so far it's fairly unanimous that we believe there's not enough trees in the city. Third question, would you plant trees on your property if they were provided free of charge? Okay, so most people would. You say no, and I know there's various reasons for that. So, but that might be something interesting to discuss during our breakout sessions too. Right. So I'd like to, before I jump into the tree regulations, I would like to start with talking about why we're doing this. And really it's because of the benefits of an urban forest. So urban forest is a term for all trees within the city limits, whether on public or private property, yard, park, street, parking lot, or school ground. There are many benefits of these, including removing pollution, storing carbon dioxide, thereby reducing greenhouse gases, reducing energy use in buildings, reducing stormwater runoff and erosion by intercepting rainfall. Studies show that trees increase economic vitality of cities by increasing property values, office occupancy rates, shopping frequency, while lowering crime rates and healthcare costs. Studies also show that stress rates are reduced with the presence of trees, and that people living in tree-lined neighborhoods are more likely to spend time outdoors getting to know their neighbors, which builds community. So now for a brief review of our current regulations. So we do have current tree regulations. We are working to revise those right now. So that is our current effort. So right now, tree removal is prohibited only on undeveloped lots. If you have a developed lot, our tree regulations don't affect that. Significant trees are regulated. A significant tree is a minimum diameter of 6 inches at 4 feet above grade. Depending on the landscape category of the property, 5 to 30% of significant trees must be retained. Trees that are damaged, diseased, or unsafe are exempt from retention requirements. A retention plan is required with development permits, and trees cannot be removed until the plan is approved. Retained trees must be protected. Removed trees must be replaced at a ratio of 1 1/2 inches for every diameter of the largest caliper removed significant tree. Credit is given for retention of certain trees based on size, groups of trees, species types, proximity to critical areas, or provides wildlife habitat. Bonds are required and held for 2 years to ensure the planting, proper installation, and maintenance of trees. And there is a heritage tree program. And so there's a couple different regulations or different sets of codes that protect trees. One is the actual tree regulations that I just reviewed. I went over those. Another one is our critical area regulations. So trees in critical areas are regulated a little differently than trees that are not in critical areas. So when a tree is removed or proposed for removal from a critical area, a vegetation management plan must be submitted. Removed vegetation must be replanted with native vegetation or vegetation with the same or better functions. So replaced vegetation is done in accordance with qualified professionals' recommendations based on best available science. So that's the biggest difference, where trees that are not in critical areas, as I explained on a previous slide, we look at, we replace the caliper, the size of the trees, right? And it's only the size of the largest tree removed. So, and they have to replace that. So let's say the largest tree removed is 10 inches. They have to replace trees that are the equivalent of 10 to 15 inches of caliper. Where when it's in a critical area, they're looking at the function of that system, and it's reviewed.
Nicole?
Yes.
Sorry to jump in. Do you mind defining critical area for those who may not know what that refers to?
Absolutely. So a critical area is an area such as a stream, a wetland, a slope, a steep slope. It's those more sensitive areas of the environment. And then critical areas not permitted for disturbance shall be protected by fencing. The city may require permanent protection of critical areas by placing them in tracts or easements, and bonds may be required to ensure compliance. So staff does recognize some shortfalls in our existing tree code, and this is why we are addressing this with this tree code update. So one of the shortfalls is that, you know, all lots can remove the same amount of trees no matter the size of the lot. So if you have a very large lot and you're only required to retain 30% of the trees, you can remove a lot of trees. Let's say, imagine a 2-acre lot versus a 7,200 square foot lot. Like that's, 86,000 square foot lot. There's a lot of trees. So that's, the regulations are the same no matter the size of that lot. Tree replacement is based on the largest tree removed. This may not offset the impacts of tree removal. Also, tree replacements may not replace diversity of those trees removed. So the city has heard some concerns and suggestions from the community. Some of what we have heard is we need to prevent tree canopy loss. This may include education to the community about tree regulations, or as well as regulating how many trees can be removed. Need to require a minimum canopy coverage. Need to regulate tree cutting on private land. We should provide notice to neighbors about large tree removal projects so they're aware of what's happening and know if they should be concerned. Provide a hotline for a way for the community to speak with city staff about tree removal concerns. Ensure that mitigation for tree removal is enforced, and there needs to be strong enforcement measures. For subdivisions, tree retention should be equal across all lots. That way people can't kind of game the system. So if we require 30% retention and they're all retained on maybe 1 or 2 lots, then later those lots can go back and remove 70% of their trees, right? So we need to make sure it's an equal distribution. Mitigation should preserve the function of trees removed. We need to incentivize developers and residents to retain trees. And we should allow flexibility within the code to preserve trees. We have started, after listening to public comments and having a focus group, we've started coming up with some proposed code changes. So these are things you will likely see in our revised code. We regulate trees on all residential properties. Like I said, currently it's only on undeveloped lots, but we may regulate them on all lots, whether they're developed or not. We may require a minimum tree density on lots. Might scale retention and minimum density requirements to the size of the property. May have separate standards for tree removal during construction and tree removal not associated with construction. So for instance, during construction, developer might be going in and removing a lot of trees for the purpose of building a house and driveway. Where after that house is built, someone may just need to remove a tree because, it's for whatever reason. Maybe they want to put solar panels in their house and it's blocking the solar angle, or, a tree is dripping sap all over their car. So there might be just one tree that needs to be removed. So separate standards for that. Provide options for offsite tree replacement and fee in lieu. So if we require people to replace their trees, sometimes there isn't enough room to replace all the trees on the property. If we require 1.5 trees to be replaced for every 1 tree that's removed, they might not have room for that, especially if you have a heavily treed lot and you have to clear it to build a house. You need somewhere else to plant those trees. So this allows that. They could be planted possibly in parks or restoration areas or just schools somewhere else. Or a fee in lieu, and that fee could go to maintaining areas. Like I've heard a lot of suggestions about removal of vegetation. So maybe that could go to fund some of that work throughout the city. We'd probably add some enforcement procedures specific to trees. And then also need to make it clear that a stop work order can be issued for unpermitted tree activity. So are there any questions? Let me stop sharing my screen so for a second so we can see each other. And
Nicole, I had a question from Noemi that came in and I wasn't able to get back to her. So I'll just go ahead and read what she wrote me.
I didn't mean to send it directly to you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was doing my best to answer it. I had the code up.
oh yeah, and I forgot to say, enter your questions in chat, and then Alex will kind of help feed them to me. So,
Okay.
or he may be able to answer some too. We all work with this tree code.
So I'll go ahead and read Noemi's question here. These regulations kick in only when plans or development or tree removal is planned. Do the code provisions apply when trees are dying on city or private land because of invasive plants like ivy? And then there's another question, but I think we'll try to tackle that one first.
Yeah, so our current regulations don't address that. As far as I know, actually, Alex and Brandy are going to know the current regulations better than I do. Some of you know I've been with the city about 6 months, so I'm still getting up to speed with our current regulations too. So, but I believe that is something we do need to address. We definitely need to encourage, if not require, a removal of invasives, and I'm going to look into putting that into the code. Our current code doesn't speak about invasives that way, and if invasives are creeping up, we don't have a way to tell someone you have to remove those. However, if they are replaced trees, so if somebody got a tree permit to remove trees, and then they've replanted replacement trees, they do need to protect those replacement trees. So those have some protections. Brandy or Alex, do you have any further input about how that currently is applied? Did I cover it?
Yeah,
or?
I think you got it. It's
Okay.
We don't really. It's kind of like you said in your question, though. I mean, we don't currently regulate trees as they're dying. Development is usually the trigger for when we review or look at these types of things. And then again, we do for new projects, we require landscaping to be preserved for 2 years. So we go out 2 years after the fact and make sure no invasive species have taken over new trees or replacement trees in that time frame. But beyond that, our current code doesn't have provisions for that. And then the second question was, in non-critical areas, can native trees be replaced with invasive trees like holly?
Our current code doesn't address, types of trees, but that's something we need to put in our revised code. I believe it would be appropriate to require replacements to be, actually, okay, well, I'll keep going with that. We need to require replacements to be of a similar species, and definitely not invasive. Our current code doesn't allow invasives. I'm incorrect. It does not allow invasives, but it doesn't necessarily require another tree species of similar type.
Right, we have prohibited trees that can't be planted, but that's only through development because right now we don't regulate private property. So there you have it.
Thanks, Brandy.
And we have a couple more questions that have come in. Sybil asked, can you explain enforcement? So enforcement around tree-related complaints.
Alex or Brandy, could one of you take this? I think you're more in
Sure,
tune
yeah.
with how enforcement has occurred in the past.
So typically how it works is we'll usually rely on the community to call in these code enforcement complaints when a neighbor or something like that is doing tree work that they think is unpermitted, and then that'll get lodged as a complaint, and the planners will look into that, determine whether it was permitted, then determine whether a permit was required for the work that's being described. And then after that, once we determine that a permit is required, but no permit has been obtained, we'll open a code enforcement, or rather our code enforcement division will go out on site and take code enforcement action based on the planner's assessment. Sybil, does that kind of answer your question? That's kind of a basic overview.
Yes, it does a bit. I just wanted to know if there's serious, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to get my camera on. I wondered if there were serious monetary penalties for doing great damage.
I don't know what our code enforcement penalties look like. Brandy, my understanding is that they're not super significant at this time.
I don't think they are. However, which code enforcement was here, but I know that the fines are daily and piled on top of each other as long as the problem exists. If you haven't cleaned up the property or you haven't replanted, like we said, or something like that. But I have to admit that rarely we do that. Usually do get cooperation from property owners after the fact, of course.
Okay, thank you.
And when were these regulations last updated? Kate's asking.
That was 2017.
Thanks, Brandy. So 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And then it looks like Annie's had her hand up for a while here. Annie, did you want to
Well,
ask your question?
The question into the chat.
Okay.
Figure out how to specify how many trees or how much area could be clear cut in a lot that's going to be built on. And since a large lot could have a huge amount of trees taken down unnecessarily, maybe. What about having like a percentage of the footprint of the new construction? For instance, like 2 times the footprint, if it's a 2,000 square foot home and it's a rambler level, then you could take twice that footprint in clear cut, or 1.5 times that footprint, something like that.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm writing this down.
I'll just say something really quick then. Yeah, it's difficult with our current code. That is one of the shortfalls, because if you have a huge lot and you only have to retain 30% of the trees on that lot, you're able to clear a significant number of trees if you're in a critical area. So yeah, that is something, that's one of the really specific issues we're looking at in revising our tree code, as I understand it. And then Nicole, if you want to add anything, because we don't have any kind of area regulations when we're talking about clearing trees. It's really more about the number, the quantity of trees that you have to retain as a percentage.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at ways to do that. I think that might be one way, looking at the footprint and allow, reasonable amount of clearing in regards to the size of the footprint. Another tactic I've been considering is looking at it by different lot size. Like if your lot, say less than 10,000 square feet, you can remove 50% or something, and then if your lot's 10 to 20,000 square feet, you can remove 30%, right? Because that's a lot more than 50% on a small lot, and so on and so forth. So maybe breaking up lots per lot size I think so yeah, think about this and provide me comments at any time. I will consider that as I'm writing the regulations of how we can address this.
Had a lot of questions come in here, so just trying to work through these. We have another enforcement related question here. How well are the current regulations being enforced? It seems like we've had a lot of tree removal activity over the last few years that could potentially be in violation of current regulations. And then they've mentioned, this is from Paul, has mentioned the legacy spruce that was removed in 2014 near the CVS. And we've had that specific tree pop up a few times in the chat here.
And Brandy, I think you were around at that time. Are you aware of what happened? I think we can talk generally about enforcement. I mean, sometimes I'll start with that when we talk about the CVS tree. So we do, when we know there's an issue, we definitely do enforce. We get involved. We have a code enforcement officer who investigates, and planners investigate as well. And as Brandy explained, our first choice is cooperation. So we try to get whoever took the action to mitigate for that. Okay, if you remove this tree, let's replace a tree or two according to what our code requires. Like if you would have gotten a permit, and you will need to get a permit now retrospectively, let's go through that that practice and decide on the proper mitigation and do it. So it is done. But as we've explained a couple times here, often because of the amount of trees that are allowed to be removed, often it looks like too many trees are being removed or that they're in violation, and really it's just the function of the code. The code allows a lot of tree removal, and it doesn't necessarily provide a lot of enough protection for trees, possibly. And then Brandy, maybe you can talk about the CVS tree if you have knowledge of that.
I do. It was very controversial. It was a beautiful tree. And we don't have, even now, it still could happen today because we have just a percentage of the trees that have to be kept. And it's up to the developer to decide which trees are going to be cut. And CVS just decided that that tree was the one to go. They said, that when they cut it, they're going to make picnic tables and they have a bike rack and stuff, but that doesn't replace the beauty of that tree actually. And it was heartbreaking to see that tree go, but our code we just didn't have any teeth in our code as still today to prevent that from happening. So they were in compliance. They chose the trees they wanted to cut. We always say, select your trees carefully that you want to remove so that and where you place your buildings so that you can keep some of these trees, but it's just a recommendation. They only have to keep 5% of their trees on a commercial lot. So there's a big problem.
Okay, we had a question from Dira that said, would the fee in lieu funds go toward maintaining these areas, parks and public areas that need to have invasive plants removed? And I'm guessing that's the fee in lieu for recreation areas that we see when we process land use reviews, things like that.
Yeah, so that is, I'm glad you noticed that. That is something we're talking about including in the new code, having that as an option instead of replacing some trees. We probably require a certain amount to replace, and then maybe a small amount. There could be a fee in lieu instead of tree replacement. Again, that's all going to be come out in the drafting of this code as we work on it. But and again, how it gets spent, where it can be spent, we'll have to work through that as we draft this code. And ultimately, it'll be the decision of the city council how they feel those dollars are best spent. But I think it's a great idea to spend them on possibly invasive removals in our parks and open spaces. I see someone agreeing. Yes.
And then there's another question. Please explain shortfall number 2. You might want to refer back to the slides for that one. I don't remember which one that was. And then Susan or Brandy, do you mind picking up on the questions? We have a lot of them coming in, so I'm gonna try and start answering a few in the chat just so we can kind of keep it moving a little faster. If there are some that are able to be answered in the chat, I'll do so. But if Susan or Brandy are able to find out where I'm at in the chat and what question I'm on and pick that up, that would be super.
Okay, so I found a current code shortfall number 2. That was about tree replacement being based on the largest tree removed and how it may not offset the impacts of tree removal. So currently tree removal is based on the caliper, so the measurement of the largest tree being removed. So if you have a 10-inch tree being removed, if that's the largest tree, you have to replace trees that equal about 10 inches. So the average, when you replace new trees, they tend to be about 3-inch. That's what we require, 3-inch diameter. So that would be about 4 trees you're replacing. Now let's say you remove 10 trees, but the largest of those trees was 10 inches. But you only have to replace 4 trees because the code only requires you to offset the largest tree removed. You can see how this doesn't adequately replace the amount of trees that were removed. So a better way would be to replace the amount of trees removed, either 1 to 1 or 1.5 to 1, 2 to 1, something like that, or possibly look at tree canopy. So you have no loss in canopy, because that is a huge benefit out of trees is the canopy size. I hope that explained that shortfall.
And I would say too, this is Susan McLean. I would say that in our codes, we have been looking at other jurisdictions. We're always challenged to balance, create sort of a policy balance by providing options for developers so they can use their land. It's sort of a private property rights issue with our environmental goals also. And so those are some of the things that we think about as we're drafting policies. And we also have challenges like there are very small lots in the cities currently where it's really difficult to kind of select trees that will fit on those. Those are some of the challenges that we're facing. A little bit easier when we're talking about a single family lot that's very large. And then we also, enforcement really is a challenge. I think somebody brought up in the chat the need for staff to provide oversight for some of the tree regulations as well. And so those are some of the challenges that we'll be thinking about and providing to council sort of some considerations as we redraft parts of the code. I don't know if there are any developers in the room. It would be good to hear from that side as well, just in terms of sort of a practical perspective of what somebody who's wanting to provide housing on a lot, for example, and some of the challenges they might face in preserving trees.
So I saw another question from Kate here that I think I can address quickly. You asked, so no private property is rated as a critical area? Yes, their critical areas do fall on private property, and tree removal is regulated differently within critical areas than non-critical areas within the city. So the quick answer, yes, private property is included within the overlay of critical areas.
And that Maple Wild property must have been rated critical given the drainage and the tree coverage there, correct?
Right. It's
I don't know the specifics of that
You should go,
project.
just a disaster. It's horrendous.
And the last time I drove by a couple of days ago, it was 4 times bigger than it was the first time I drove by and saw it and was horrified.
Okay, we're gonna ask that you use the chat or raise hand feature so we can stay on track because there's a lot of people. Yeah, thank you.
Did we already address the regulations on that particular property and how that?
We haven't. Maybe Brandy can talk about that a little more because I know she has some experience with that. If we want to.
Yeah, and one of the challenges was that with that one is when our regulations were drafted, they were anticipating a lot that might have been 7,200 square feet or 12,000 square feet in size. This one was much larger. And
Yeah,
so-
this one was 3 acres in
Yeah.
size. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest part there. That's one of those where I was saying to some people, it looks like we're not regulating the code, but it's just that our code allows a lot of tree removal. So a 3-acre lot, that's almost 130,000 square feet. That's a lot. And there's a lot of trees and they're allowed to remove all but 30%. Now there was, and I think there was a steep slope on that lot.
There is a steep slope. They were, they've saved 68% of the trees, but you can't really tell that because you're, it looks like it's been so clear cut, but the property goes way up on top of the hill and they couldn't cut any of the trees on that steep slope, only what was below. But yeah, they kept more than they would have been required, but because it was a critical area, they were still had to keep about 60, I think it's 68% that they kept on that property. And that's just where these percentages come in. It's a lot more trees on a large piece of property than it is on your normal 7,200 square foot lot.
So clearly one of what we'll be looking at is as Nicole and others are drafting tree regulations is we ask ourselves, how would it apply to that really large lot? How would it apply to a really small lot? And taking a look at all those implications coming months.
Yeah, and to explain a little bit more about how Alex was saying, like there's overlays. So generally they were allowed to remove 70% of the trees on that lot, but because a large part of it was critical area, they couldn't touch most of the trees. Like Brandy said, they ended up retaining 68% of the trees because of our critical area regulations and how they preserve trees in critical areas. But
in the location.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the location of their home. There's a wetland on there too, so they had to stay away from that with a 50-foot buffer around it. There is a lot of things going on that lot, a lot of overlays, a lot of different, drainage came into play and how they were going to be catching that water that was coming off the hill. There was a lot of planning in that. Granted, they did remove a lot of trees, but it was all within the framework of the code and what was allowed.
And I wonder if maybe this would be a good time to do our breakout session. I don't know if we're still planning that, Nicole, but
yeah, we should do that before as we're kind of running out of time. But we can always try to do some more questions later if we have some time. And you can always email me with questions. I'm happy to, or have a phone conversation with me. Always happy to address questions. So even if we can't get to them tonight. So it's time for a group discussion. Actually, I should go back to not share the screen because I need to do breakout rooms. So I am going to put everybody, let's see, So now it's time to go into breakout rooms. Staff will be hosting these, and we will be presenting you with a series of, well, I think 3 or 4 questions. And we'd love to hear feedback, and staff will be collecting your responses, and we will use those to inform the draft code regulations of how we write those. All right, see you all in a few minutes. Okay.
Caucus, the 34th LD caucus that you said you
I
wanted to
need
join.
to do some rearranging. I see we're all on there.
All the staff are in the same room here.
All right, I'll leave the room.
How much?
So it's a shell of a program, sounds like.
Seems like it.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
At the very least, I think it's great that they're having this meeting, and it does seem like Nicole is at least attentive to people's concerns.
Yeah, totally.
Why though?
Here you go, Kel. Unmute Nicole.
Unmute yourself.
Sorry, there's an issue. I did this random breakout room thing, and it put all the staff in one breakout room. So,
Of course it did.
so
Can I just get something cleared up? My sound, my volume is kind of not real great. You guys are working now on redoing the tree regulations, is that correct?
yes.
And do you have parameters within which you have liberty and guidelines of where you can't go?
It's a good question. Yeah, we can't be so strict that we prohibit all development, right? We're a nation built on private property rights, and people have the right to develop their property. So we can't just prohibit all development outright. And another limit is what they call, the legal term is nexus, meaning there has to be a connection to what we require and what's happening on the ground. So if somebody is removing 3 trees on the property, we can require them to mitigate for those 3 trees, but we can't say, well, the city's lost like 50% of its tree cover over the last 10 years. So we're going to make you replace a couple extra trees to make up for that tree coverage loss. We can't do that legally. We can only require from them to mitigate for the impact they're creating.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
that's
so-
another limit.
So have you developed, what do I want to call, like the mission state, not the mission statement, but principles that guide you? For instance, we're interested in tree canopy for the city. We're concerned with people's health. We're concerned with climate change. We're concerned with capturing carbon. I mean, do we have some of those kind of guidelines that we're looking at in this?
There is a mission state or objective is what they call objective statement in the code already. I've looked at that. I've thought about adding a few statements to it, but we can always put more in there to kind of make it more appropriate. But I think it's a decent objective already. It's just that the codes don't really meet that objective, but that's what we're trying to do now.
And do you have professional resources that you can go to ask questions of a more technical nature? For instance, on carbon capture, the carbon capturing happens along the outside of the phloem, which is the column of the trunk that moves food up from the roots to the leaves. And so if you visualize the column, its size depends on the girth and the height. So when you compare a very well-developed tree, you can get a good estimation of that column, and then you can figure out how many little trees are going to make up for it. And you will be absolutely amazed at how many little trees it would take to make up a good sized tree. But I think that's, a realistic, for example, a realistic way to look at some of the criteria that you might want to use.
Okay, that's a great idea to consider that as a way to account for mitigation for how many trees get replaced.
And there may be also similar things that have to do with the cover, with the shading, with the amount of leaves, beyond my expertise, but
okay.
I'm sure there are experts who know about that kind of thing.
Yeah. We have a biologist group where they have an arborist on hand, and so we can use them. They are a third-party consultant.
Well, I
So-
think-
So when it comes to some of the regulations that you're considering, are you kind of thinking about it just as it relates to some of the guidelines that the state are promoting, or are you trying to get out ahead and maybe?
I haven't really considered the state regulations necessarily. We always work from just best practices and best available science. And
I heard specifically that the vegetation right now, it's required that there's a 50-foot buffer for vegetation along streams. I know that there has been, I believe that's a state guideline or rule, but is Burien considering addressing that? And could they, if they wanted to, say, shift that to 100 feet, or are you required to, adhere to the state's regulations?
Yeah, so that's what we call our critical area regulations. Those are the regulations that affect streams, creeks, streams, river. We don't really have rivers in the city, but wetlands, steep slopes, critical aquifer recharge areas, fish and wildlife habitat areas. So like if there's like an endangered species, like their habitat, those are all protected under critical area regulations, and those are adopted. We have those. And by state law, we have to update those every 10 years. So I'm not exactly sure when our next update is, but probably I need to check that, but I know it's not on our list. So we probably have a couple years till we get to those. But when those get updated, we work with consultants who do this all the time, and they have teams of biologists. And again, those regulations are based on best available science at that moment. And it seems like every time we do them, those buffers get bigger, because as science realizes, buffers just haven't been big enough in the past, and you just need to keep increasing those. So Yeah, so we do have those regulations, absolutely.
I think, is your name Dira? Dira asked, I think twice in the chat, if the city is considering hiring an arborist to help like guide developers or people who are looking to cut down trees on their land. Is the city looking into hiring an arborist or a specialist of that kind?
We'd love to. We'd like to use, if we can get some funding from city council. Even if we don't, what we will write into the code and what's always feasible is that if somebody wants to remove trees on their property, they apply for a tree permit. And as part of that, they agree to third-party review, which means they pay for us to hire an arborist to review the plans.
Okay.
So even if we don't have one as a city arborist, we can bring in those services. Like I said, we have a biologist team that has an arborist, so they can look at those plans if we have questions. Because not all actions require an arborist. Some are pretty straightforward. Others are much more complicated though.
This is somewhat related to that, but I was wondering if the city has thought about considering hiring or promoting from within. And I think you would seem like a perfect person for this position, but like say creating like a director of the environment and public health.
That would be wonderful. I just don't think we have the resources for that. Maybe in the future, if we can find a funding source, but unfortunately we don't. You know what? We're almost out of time for our breakout room. So let me ask you a couple of questions really quick. so we can participate in the group discussion after this. So just wondering, is there any incentive that would result in you retaining or planting trees on your property?
Well, beyond the fact that I enjoy them, or so like pretend I'm a person that doesn't really care.
Yeah, like what if you didn't understand the value of trees? What might get you to plant or retain trees?
I think if you guys paid for them.
Okay.
Paid for them and then provided help planting them. I'm sure there's tons of people who either can't plant them, they physically can't plant them, or they don't know how. It's intimidating.
I would also say, like, we have two neighbors. One neighbor that is owns this property, but they are actually Canadian, so it's a rental property. And then the other side is I believe a low income property, but both of their yards are neglected. And if you guys provided like invasive species removal, because we spend days in the summer clipping around our fence because we don't want blackberries and ivy to get into our yard.
Yeah. Okay.
These are specifically two rental houses too. So, I mean, I think it speaks to maybe the need to kind of address various landlords.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have another question. Right now we're kind of focused on residential properties, but should trees be retained on commercial properties as well? I think from the questions we heard in the chat, this is definitely yes.
Yeah.
I have a question. On private property doesn't extend all the way to the edge of the asphalt or the concrete of the street, as I understand it. There's a buffer, and doesn't that buffer belong to the city?
Yeah, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends how much of the right of way has been developed. So sometimes what appears to be someone's property is right of way. And we do have regulations about tree retention in right of way, and those aren't part of what we're discussing. This particular update wouldn't affect that.
I would just suggest, I will make a terrible confession that I migrated up here from California. I lived in the city of Monterey Park in Southern California when I was young. And that city developed a street tree program for which it received many awards. So you might want to take a look at Monterey Park, California street tree program and see how they went about doing it. Basically, they didn't do it the way I would have done it, but nonetheless, I was in an area where the homes were owned by the people living in them. So I'm not sure how they did it around apartments or in commercial areas, but we were invited to go along with, and then the city planted a street tree, and each street had a particular species of tree. I would have mixed them up and had different species, but so we got a liquid amber out of the deal, and they brought it and they planted it, and it grew beautifully, and it was absolutely gorgeous.
Right. So that might be a really good thing to do.
Oh, sorry.
One more question before our breakout session closes. What should the city consider in terms of tree regulations that apply to different size lots, like we talked about during some of the questions?
You know, it would be really nice if it. I mean, here's the thing: is you got to put like a parameter on it, but you know, wouldn't it be nice if it, you know, developers in the city could work together to just, you know, maximize the amount of trees that could be kept for all of the wonderful reasons that, you know, people love to live near trees and yada yada, you know, the health reasons. So I guess I don't know the number, but I just am curious if other, you know, municipalities have figured that out a little bit.
It seems like it needs to be.
Yeah, but I bet you could go onto a property, somebody who knows what they're doing, and estimate the carbon capture potential of the trees on the property. And then if you would set a percentage that you wanted to preserve the carbon capture, that could be a rough rule of thumb as to how many trees they can take off.
I think your point about our current regulations being too broad and not taking into account the size of parcels is a great one. I think we should have greater regulations for larger parcels, and then also for the types of parcels. Like I think that, you know, mixed use, you know, types of development should have, you know, separate regulations that are specific for that.
Yeah, and one more thing, I don't know if this would work, or if it goes back to what you were saying about you can't like have them, you can't like punish them for something that isn't on their property, but it would be really great if you could somehow look at like adjacent properties, because like we said, the Maple Wild property down the street here has a bunch of contiguous forest with coyotes and all kinds of stuff living in it, partially because it's contiguous, because it's next to other lots that haven't been developed and the park. And so like, if you don't want a whole bunch of like separated little forests and trees, which it would be nice if we have a section of the city that isn't like that it's contiguous, then, you know, looking at that as like a bigger picture.
Yeah, I like that approach. We definitely with our development need to have a more holistic view. And I like the idea of looking at the adjacent properties and like, because what you're going to do on your land is going to affect your neighbor, really.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Boulevard Park is a great example where the public works gal said that the developer clear cut, and then that's when a lot of the flooding started. And it's like,
all right, so rooms are going to close. So,
okay,
we got about 50 seconds left. Okay, so I like that. Yeah. So like, and I think that goes to just not beyond, I like where you're going though. I think it's even going beyond tree regulation, where we look at all of our development regulations.
Right.
Start
segmentation and cumulative effects. That's really what we're talking about. It's not taking a bunch of stuff and looking at each thing segmentally, dividing it up, and look at the whole picture of what's going on, what's been going on, and what's planned for the future.
Shifting our approach. And I do think that there's so much opportunity in Burien to really, you know, take, you know, particularly our commercial corridors and reassess the way that we're developing. You know, and I think there's opportunity to add green space along.
I think also if developing privately and commercially, if you were to require parking.
Okay, so welcome back, everyone. I think we're all back now. Sorry, I closed. I know there was really good conversation going on in my group, so I don't know what the other groups are like, but I can't wait to hear some of the feedback. So Let's see. Where should we start? Alex, do you want to start with what your group said?
Sure, yeah. So we had a really great conversation, lots of really good input. In terms of incentives, I'll just hit on some of the highlights. We felt that providing trees directly to developers and applicants would be very effective, and means testing based on project size. So it's kind of scaling that, how much we're able to provide. And then also the potential for regulating tree removal on a sliding scale based on lot size, so that you're not applying the same removal standards to every single lot size. So kind of scaling it out for lot size appropriateness. And then there was also an emphasis on educating the community and collaborating with them on this, and how the more involved the community is and energized about the topic, and the more we have community conversations that are pulling more people in, that the more buy-in we're going to have, and the more people are going to realize the importance of this issue, and the more they're going to want to participate and help us reach the common goal. So education and involving the community is a priority moving forward, and potentially collaborating with Highline School District and other local area schools. That was something we mentioned as well.
Great. Thank you. Brandy, can you share what your group said?
Several things. We agreed to that the sliding scale, like what Alex's group was talking about, for the size of the lot and the number of trees that you would be keeping. And one thing that we were talking about for incentives would be to fast track permits for developers who were to keep a significant number of trees, or was their plans were were sensitive to where the trees were, and keeping the larger trees. And also, I thought a good idea was certification for trees, for developers who keep trees, like we have for LEED buildings now. And it would be something that they could have as a certificate that they could show that they're tree sensitive or environmentally sensitive, something like that, and have it something like that for developers that keep trees in their development. And I think that was about it. Yeah, otherwise it was, we talked about the city needing an arborist to help people who are low income, or people of color, or just need help with finding out where they should put their trees, and help with them with assessing their property, with assessing the trees on their property, something like that through the city. And then funds from, the state has a program now that there is going through the process that may open up more funding for local jurisdictions for tree retention and plantings. And so to watch that carefully to see if we can get into some money from the state to help with people with their properties and their trees. Okay.
Susan, would you like to share?
Hey there. Hi there. Yeah, I'm Susan, and I had Councilmember Nancy Tosta and Sybil Davis with me in my group. It was a great conversation. Thank you both. We thought that for the first question, there was an interest in providing dollars, or providing a financial incentive to plant trees, or to reduce permit costs, there was a thought that education is very important to convey to property owners how important trees are to energy reduction, property values, reducing climate impacts, stabilize critical areas, and just overall pride in Burien. There was also an interesting idea about providing technical support to help contractors understand how to preserve and protect trees during construction. On the second question about commercial properties, there was unanimous support for retaining trees on commercial properties, and also recognition that it can be a little more challenging since buildings typically take up more space. There was discussion about trees in the right of way to provide the aesthetic benefits and, you know, the importance of shade. It was noted that how beautiful the lights are on trees downtown, they can kind of add to the identity of a business district also. Question 3 was about smaller and larger lots. And I think there was an understanding that there are differences, but in order to sort of treat those different sizes of lots fairly, some kind of formula that relates to tree retention and the size of the lot. And then in terms of different communities and people of color, lower income communities, I think there was an idea of that the benefits to all of those communities apply across the board to all communities, regardless of income or cultural background or language. But we should probably do education in different languages that appeal to different cultural groups, so that we recognize that different people from different backgrounds have different attitudes about trees. But education in a way that people can relate to would be very helpful. And again, incentives to help to support lower income households. And then just recognizing that trees are a part of healthy outcomes for all communities.
Thank you. And I had a group as well, and we had a really good discussion. And a lot of, I'm hearing, you know, in other groups, a lot of similar thinking to my group said, but I'd like to add a few more things, you know, as ways to incentivize tree retention and planting. They said, in addition to the city providing trees, like maybe we could actually help with planting as well. And also we should include invasive plant removal with that, because as most of us know, ivy is killing our local trees, and it's really imperative to get that removed. So we should include that as a goal, along with planting additional trees. We should, you know, retention on all properties is important, whether it's private, commercial, right of way. Trees just need to be preserved everywhere. They suggested, we're trying to figure out how to write these regulations, you know, look at other cities, see what they're doing, see how they regulate tree retention on different size lots. One thing we could possibly do is base tree retention on carbon capture. And also, you know, my group was looking at it even beyond this current code, and a really good goal as we're updating our codes is to be looking at adjacent properties and preserve basically green belts or a system of trees for greater environmental benefit. And just in general, reassess how we are developing in the city and ensure that green space preservation, creation, and retention of trees is always considered across all code changes and how we do development within the city. Go back here. So thank you for group discussions. So this concludes our meeting for tonight. So thank you everybody for joining. I think we heard some really good feedback today, and there's so much conversation. I think my breakout room could have gone on for a couple hours. So please reach out to staff with further suggestions, any questions you may have. We have a project website here where we're going to try to keep updating it as we go through the process. There will be upcoming planning commission and city council meetings, which provide opportunity for public input. You can contact me to get on the listserv and receive updates. You're all on it now. If I believe I have most of your emails. If not, definitely just reach out to me anyway. Make sure I have your email so I can keep you up to date. And then send questions or comments to Brandy or I. Our emails are here at the bottom of the screen. So Nicole G at burienwa.gov or Brandy E at burienwa.gov. And we look forward to getting more input from you all. And just, I want to thank you so much for coming here tonight. Good night, all.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Night.